darlings, Mimi G here with another sew along as part of my Mimi G for Simplicity pattern collection. Today we're going to be working on 1167 View A, which is this fantastic must-have in every wardrobe tank top. Before getting started, if you need help on picking out your pattern size, how to lay out your fabric, how to place your pattern pieces onto your fabric, how to cut out your pattern pieces, please refer to the basics video before moving any further. For this tank top, since we are using a knit fabric, I'm going to switch from my universal needle to a stretch needle. Let's go over the pattern pieces that we're going to need. This one's pretty simple. We're going to need the front, which is pattern piece number 1. We're going to need the back, which is pattern piece number 2. Both of these pattern pieces are cut on the fold of your fabric. Then we're going to need pattern piece number 3, which is the neckband. And we're going to need pattern piece number 4, which is our armhole band. It's only 4 pieces, so we're going to get through this pretty quickly. Now the beauty of this tank top is that you can make it longer if you want to. You can also make it a size larger, which I prefer to do because I like my tanks to be a little slouchy and not form-fitting. So I have cut a size larger than I normally would so that I could get that flowy look to my tank. I've already cut out my pattern pieces. I have my front, which was cut on the fold of my fabric. And I have my back. And I have my armhole and my neckband. We are going to sew up our tank top. So we're going to start with our neckband. I want you to fold it in half with right sides facing, and we're going to stitch this closed. And then I want you to press it open. And then what you're going to do is you're going to press it in half so that we're looking at the right side. And I want you to press it all the way around. You're going to do the same exact thing for your armhole bindings. With right sides facing, you're going to fold them in half. You're going to stitch them together, and then you're going to press it open and fold it in half and press all the way around. Now that I have sewn and pressed my neck bands and my armhole bands, I'm going to set these aside, and I'm going to place my front to back at shoulders with right sides facing, of course. So I'm going to pin and I'm going to do the same thing for the other shoulder. Align my notches and pin. And I'm going to sew them using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And you do the other one the same way. And I want you to go ahead and press your shoulder seams open. Once our shoulder seams are sewn and pressed, we're going to sew up our side seams. So I want you to pin, align your notch, and we're going to sew until we get to our dot. Also using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And backstitch. You're going to do the same thing to the other side. You're going to align your notch. You're going to pin at the top, and then pin where your dot is, and sew from the top to your dot. Now that our side seams are sewn, I want you to press both side seams open. So I have pressed my side seams open, and then I also pressed it flat all the way down and then just turned that seam allowance in again and then pressed it, and we're going to stitch really close to the folded edge and then across and all the way down. Pivot, pivot, now give it one more press and do the other vent the same way. Now we're going to attach our neck binding. So grab your neck binding and we're going to place it on the right side of our tank, and we're going to align first our back notches. So you should have 2 notches at the back, and so I want you to pin there first. And then you should have dots that you marked onto your binding, and so that dot corresponds to your shoulder seam. So you're going to place that dot right on your shoulder seam, and you're going to do the same thing on the other side. So locate your dot and place it on your side seam. I always like to mark my center front on my binding and on my tops or tanks or tees, whatever I'm making, so that way I know exactly where the center front of my shirt is and the center front of my binding, because you want the binding to go around evenly. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start sewing at the center back, and we're going to sew all the way around. So starting at my center back and using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, I'm going to start to sew and pull my neckband a bit so that it fits onto my neckline, because our neckband is slightly smaller than the neckline on our neck, so that it snaps and you don't have that wobbly looking neckline. When you're done with your neck band, it's going to look a little wonky, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to press it. We're going to press it into shape. And so you want to lay it flat, and we're going to press, making sure that our seam allowance is towards our top and not our binding. Okay, I pressed my neckline and my seam allowance is facing my top. And so now we're going to top stitch. We're going to sew on our tank, not our binding, pretty close to the edge, all the way around. After I've done the stitching, I like to go back in and I like to trim away all of this excess. Now if you have a serger, you could have serged it off, but I'm going to cut it pretty close to that stitching. And I'm going to do that all around my neckline. Make sure that you don't accidentally snip into your t-shirt. You're only cutting away the seam allowance. When you're done, give it one more final press, and you will see the difference in how your neckline lays flat versus not cutting off the excess seam allowance, and also top stitching that seam allowance into place and then giving it a really good press. Now you're going to do the armholes pretty much the exact same way. Now working on our armhole, we're going to align your side seam to the seam on your binding, on your armhole binding, and I'm going to pin there. And then I'm going to make sure that the dot that's on my binding is on my shoulder seam. And now, starting at the side seam, I'm going to sew using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around. Once you have finished sewing it on, you're going to do the same exact thing. You're going to press your seam allowance towards the tank, not the binding, and then you're going to top stitch close to the edge on the tank, not the binding, and you're going to do the same thing to the other armhole. The last thing we have to do is the hem of our tank. So what you're going to do is you're going to press 1/4 of an inch, and then you're going to press again another 1/2 inch, and you're going to stitch close to the edge across the back, and then you're going to do the same thing across the bottom. I'm going to do the same thing to the front, and then you are all done. That's all there is to it. I hope you've enjoyed this sew along. Until next time, peace.